there are moments in life when everything you thought you knew about love just shatters. When the people you sacrificed everything for look at you with eyes full of judgment, with mouths full of mockery, with hearts that forgot every single thing you ever did for them. When your own children, the ones you carried, the ones you raised, the ones you protected with every breath in your body, turn around and tell you that you're nothing, that you never built anything, that you never achieved anything worth talking about. I know how that feels. I know what it's like to sit at a dinner table surrounded by your own blood and feel completely invisible, to hear laughter at your expense, to watch your children exchange glances that say, without words, that they're embarrassed by you, that they think you wasted your life, that they believe you're just a simple old woman who never understood what it meant to be successful, to be powerful, to matter in this world. The knot in your throat when your own son says, with that condescending smile, "Mom, you never really did anything with your life, did you?" The weight in your chest when your daughter rolls her eyes and whispers something to her husband, and they both laugh, looking at your old clothes, your simple jewelry, your quiet demeanor, the feeling of being so small, so insignificant, in a room full of people who only exist because you gave them life. Have you ever given everything you had to someone, poured your heart and soul into loving them, building a life for them, creating opportunities for them, only to be treated like you were worthless? Like your sacrifices meant nothing? Like the years you spent working, planning, strategizing in silence were just wasted time? I want you to comment right now where you're watching this from, because your story matters. Your presence here matters. And I want you to know that what I'm about to tell you is not just my story. It's the story of thousands of women who've been underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed by the very people they loved most. What happened to me could happen to any mother, any woman who chose to build in silence rather than show off every achievement. But what I did after the biggest humiliation of my life changed everything. And I mean everything. There are thousands of women living this pain quietly right now, being underestimated by their own children, treated as if they were weak, empty, meaningless, as if the love they gave wasn't enough, as if the life they built had no weight, no value, no significance in this world. But there comes a moment, one exact moment, when you decide that enough is enough, when you stop begging for respect and start demanding it, when you realize that the quietest woman in the room might just be the most powerful one there. At the end of this story, you're going to understand the power of rising up even when everyone expects you to stay down. You're going to discover that silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's strategy, sometimes it's strength, sometimes it's the calm before a storm that changes everything. And what happened after my children humiliated me for the last time? Something nobody saw coming. You're not alone in this. All of us have loved too much, suffered too much, and still found the strength to keep going when everyone thought we were finished. The pain of being underestimated by your own children isn't just about money or success. It's a wound in your soul. It's watching those eyes you once cradled, those hands you once held through every fear and every triumph, turn their backs on you. It's hearing voices you taught to speak now use words that cut deeper than any knife ever could. Let me tell you how it all started, how I got to that breaking point, how I ended up sitting at a Christmas dinner surrounded by my family, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my entire life. For years, I lived a simple life. Basic clothes, modest home, no flashy cars, no designer bags, no expensive vacations plastered all over social media. My children grew up watching me work hard, but they never asked what I really did. They never wanted to know, never bothered to dig deeper. To them, I was just mom, the woman who cleaned, who cooked, who solved everyone's problems, who was always there when they needed something. Nothing more than that. As time passed, they built their careers. They got good salaries, nice apartments, impressive job titles. They started posting photos of expensive restaurants, luxury brands, weekend getaways to places I'd never been. And slowly, gradually, their eyes changed when they looked at me. The respect faded. The admiration disappeared. What replaced it was something much worse, pity mixed with contempt. Mom, you never invested in anything. Mom, you could have done so much more with your life. Mom, we had to sacrifice and work hard all by ourselves to get where we are. Every word was a stab to the heart, because they didn't know. They had absolutely no idea what I had been building in silence all those years. What I had created while they were busy climbing their corporate ladders and collecting their paychecks and feeling so proud of themselves. I could have shouted the truth right then and there. I could have shown them everything immediately. laid it all out on the table and watched their faces change. But I didn't. I wanted to see how far their arrogance would go, how deep their disrespect would run. I wanted to know if they would ever stop and think, even for a moment, that maybe they didn't know everything about their mother. And it went far. Further than I ever imagined it would. Last Christmas, during dinner, my oldest son laughed at me in front of everyone. He actually laughed. He said I was a woman without ambition, that I never knew how to make real money, that I had settled for a small, insignificant life. The others laughed along with him. My daughter-in-law made a comment about my old clothes, how I should at least try to look presentable. My grandchildren looked at me with something I never wanted to see in their eyes. Pity. Like I was some charity case. Some poor old woman who needed their sympathy. And me? I smiled. I took a sip of my wine. And I waited. Because there's a difference between the woman who begs for respect and the woman who simply decides when she's going to reveal the truth. There's a difference between the woman who screams to be heard and the woman who waits for the perfect moment to let her actions speak louder than any words ever could. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't shouting. It's not crying. It's not defending yourself desperately while everyone judges you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is smile, stay silent, and let the truth unfold in its own time. And that's exactly what I did. If you've ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you most, leave a heart in the comments right now, because you need to know that you're not alone, that your pain is valid, that your story matters. I want you to understand something important before we go any further. This isn't just about money. This isn't just about proving someone wrong or showing off wealth. This is about dignity, about the years of sacrifice that get erased in a single dismissive comment, about the love that turns into a wound when the people you built everything for treat you like you built nothing at all. For decades, I worked in silence. I made decisions that nobody knew about. I took risks that would have terrified most people. While my children were in school, while they were in college, while they were starting their careers and feeling so independent and accomplished, I was building an empire they couldn't even begin to imagine. Real estate, investments, business partnerships, properties in 3 different states, a portfolio that grew steadily, quietly, strategically, year after year. I didn't need to post about it. I didn't need to brag. I didn't need anyone's approval or applause. I just needed to be smart, patient, and focused. But they never asked. They never wondered. They just assumed that because I lived simply, I had nothing. That because I didn't show off, I hadn't succeeded. That because I dressed modestly and drove an old car, I was somehow less than them. And that assumption, that arrogance, that complete lack of curiosity about who I really was beyond the role of mom, that's what hurt the most. You see, I learned something very early in life. I learned it from my own mother, actually. She used to tell me that the loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful one. That real strength doesn't need to announce itself. That true wealth whispers while poverty shouts. I watched her live that philosophy every single day. She worked hard, saved carefully, invested wisely, and never once felt the need to prove anything to anyone. And when she passed away, she left me something far more valuable than money. She left me the understanding that your worth isn't determined by other people's perception of you. It's determined by what you build when nobody's watching. So that's what I did. I built when nobody was watching. I created when nobody was paying attention. I grew my wealth while everyone assumed I had none. And I did it all without needing a single word of validation from anyone. My children were busy with their lives, and that was fine. I wanted them to focus on their education, their careers, their own paths. I never asked them for money. Never complained about my situation. Never made them feel like they owed me anything. I supported them when they needed it, celebrated their successes, and kept my own achievements private. But somewhere along the way, they mistook my humility for weakness, my silence for ignorance, my simplicity for failure. And that's when the disrespect started creeping in. It began with small comments, little jokes at family gatherings. Mom still uses that old phone. Mom's still wearing clothes from 10 years ago. Mom doesn't understand how the world works anymore. They'd laugh and I'd smile, and inside I'd feel this strange mixture of disappointment and curiosity. Disappointment that they saw me this way. Curiosity about how long it would take before they realized the truth. Years went by. Their condescension grew. The jokes became less playful and more cutting. The eye rolls became more frequent. The comparisons started. You should see how my friend's mom lives. She has a beautiful house. My colleague's mother just retired to Europe. Why didn't you ever want more for yourself, Mom? Why didn't I want more? as if wanting more and having more were the same thing, as if I had somehow failed at life because I chose not to display my success like a trophy. I remember one particular evening. It was my birthday. My daughter had organized dinner at her place. Everyone was there. My sons, their wives, my grandchildren. It should have been a beautiful moment, but instead, it became one of the most painful nights of my life. We were sitting around the table, and the conversation turned to investments. My youngest son was talking about his stock portfolio, how proud he was of his returns, how he'd finally hit 6 figures in his investment account. Everyone congratulated him. My daughter talked about the promotion she'd just received, the raise, the corner office, more congratulations. My oldest son mentioned the new car he'd just bought, fully paid, no loans. Applause all around. And then my daughter turned to me with this sympathetic smile and said, "Mom, you never really got into all this financial stuff, did you? It's okay. Not everyone is cut out for it. Some people are just more traditional." Traditional. As if my choices were rooted in ignorance rather than strategy. My son-in-law chimed in. "Yeah, it's a different generation. They didn't have the same opportunities we have now. They didn't think about building wealth the way we do." And there it was. That assumption that I had simply existed through life without ambition, without vision, without the intelligence or courage to build something substantial. That I was just a product of a different generation that didn't understand money. I looked around that table, at their confident faces, their self-satisfied smiles, their complete and utter certainty that they had surpassed me in every possible way. And I made a decision right then and there. I would let them keep talking, keep assuming, keep building this false narrative about who I was and what I'd accomplished, because the truth was going to be so much more powerful when it finally came out. I raised my glass and said, "You're all doing wonderfully. I'm so proud of each of you." And I meant it. I was proud, but I was also hurt. Deeply, profoundly hurt that they thought so little of me. The months that followed were harder. The comments became more frequent. My oldest son started suggesting that maybe I should downsize my house, move into something smaller, something more manageable for someone my age. My daughter offered to help me create a budget, as if I didn't know how to manage the little money they assumed I had. My youngest son even mentioned assisted living at one point, laughing like it was a joke, but I could see the serious consideration behind his eyes. They were planning my decline, preparing for my dependence, positioning themselves as my future caretakers, not out of love, but out of obligation, out of pity. And then came Christmas, the breaking point, the moment when everything changed. We gathered at my oldest son's house. He'd just bought a new place, something impressive, something he wanted to show off. Marble countertops, high ceilings, a wine cellar. He gave us all a tour, and I could see the pride in his eyes, the feeling of accomplishment, and I was happy for him, truly. But then during dinner, the conversation shifted. My daughter-in-law started talking about charity, about how important it was to give back, about how they were sponsoring a family for the holidays, providing gifts, food, support. Everyone nodded approvingly. It was a beautiful gesture. But then she looked at me and said, "You know, Mom, if you ever need help, you just have to ask. We're family. We take care of our own." The table went quiet for a moment, and then my oldest son added, "Yeah, Mom, seriously. If things are tight, we can help out. No shame in it. You took care of us growing up. Now it's our turn." My daughter reached over and patted my hand. "We just want to make sure you're comfortable, that you're not struggling." Struggling. They thought I was struggling. My youngest son jumped in. "I've actually been looking into some senior assistance programs, really good ones. They help with expenses, healthcare, all of that. I can send you some information." And then my oldest son laughed, that same condescending laugh I'd heard so many times before, and said, "Let's be honest, Mom. You never really learned how to build wealth. You worked hard, sure, but you never invested, never took risks, never understood how money actually works. And that's fine. Not everyone has that mindset, but you don't have to pretend anymore. We know things are probably tough. We see the old car, the old clothes, the same small house you've been in forever. It's okay to admit you need help." Everyone was looking at me, waiting for me to break down, to admit defeat, to accept their charity with grateful tears, to confirm everything they believed about me. I took a slow sip of wine, set the glass down carefully, looked at each of their faces one by one, and I smiled. "Thank you for your concern," I said quietly. "But I'm doing just fine." My daughter laughed nervously. "Mom, you don't have to be proud. We're not judging you. I'm not being proud, I replied. I'm being honest. My son-in-law shook his head. Come on, you can't possibly be doing fine. You live like someone who's barely getting by. And that's when I decided. Right there, right in that moment. I was done being quiet, done being underestimated, done letting them build their entire sense of superiority on a foundation of complete ignorance about who I really was. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and I placed it on the table. Maybe, I said calmly, you should take a look at this before you make any more assumptions about my financial situation. The silence that followed was deafening. My oldest son picked up the phone first. His eyes scanned the screen, then widened, then narrowed like he was trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Like maybe it was a mistake, a glitch, something that couldn't possibly be real. He passed the phone to his wife without saying a word. She looked. Her mouth fell open. She passed it to my daughter. My daughter stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. Her hand started trembling. She passed it to her husband, then to my youngest son. Each person at that table had the exact same reaction. Shock, disbelief, confusion, and then something else, something that looked almost like fear. My oldest son finally spoke. His voice was different now, smaller, uncertain. Mom, is this real? I took my phone back and slipped it into my purse. Yes, it's real. My daughter's voice cracked. But how? How is this even possible? You never talked about any of this. You never mentioned investments or properties or anything. You live in the same house. You drive the same car. You wear the same clothes. How do you have this much money? I leaned back in my chair and took another sip of wine. Let the question hang in the air for a moment. Let them sit with their shock and their embarrassment and their rapidly crumbling assumptions. I have this much money, I said slowly, because I've been building wealth for over 30 years while you all assumed I was doing nothing. I have 7 properties across 3 states. I own commercial real estate that generates monthly income. I have investment portfolios that have been growing steadily since before some of you were even born. I built an empire in silence while you were busy judging me for living simply. My youngest son shook his head. But why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you ever say anything? Because I didn't need to, I replied. I didn't build wealth to impress anyone. I built it for security, for freedom, for peace of mind. And I certainly didn't build it so I could show off at family dinners and make everyone feel small. Unlike some people, I don't measure my worth by how much I can flaunt. That last sentence landed hard. I could see it in their faces. The shame, the guilt, the slow, painful realization of how they'd been treating me. My daughter started crying. Mom, I'm so sorry. We had no idea. We thought you were struggling. We thought we were being helpful. You thought I was a failure, I corrected gently. You thought I was someone who needed to be pitied and managed. You looked at me and saw someone who never accomplished anything. Someone who didn't understand the world. Someone who needed your charity. My son-in-law tried to speak. We didn't mean it like that. We just wanted to help. I held up my hand. You wanted to feel superior. Let's be honest. Every comment about my old clothes, my old car, my simple life, it wasn't coming from a place of concern. It was coming from a place of judgment. You felt successful, and you needed me to be unsuccessful so you could feel even better about yourselves. The room was suffocating with tension. My grandchildren were staring at their plates, sensing the weight of the moment even if they didn't fully understand it. My oldest son rubbed his face with both hands. What you saw on that phone, he said quietly. That's more than all of our salaries combined. By a lot. I know, I said. You've been sitting here for years listening to us brag about our accomplishments, our salaries, our investments, and the whole time you've had more wealth than any of us will probably ever achieve. Yes. Why did you let us humiliate you like that? Why didn't you stop us? I looked at him for a long moment. My firstborn. The child I'd held in my arms and promised to always protect. The man who'd just spent months treating me like I was less than him. Because I wanted to see who you really were, I said softly. I wanted to see if you'd love and respect me even when you thought I had nothing. I wanted to know if your kindness was conditional, if your respect depended on my bank account. And now I know. My daughter was sobbing now. Mom, please, we're so sorry. We were horrible. We were arrogant and cruel, and we didn't see you. We didn't really see you. No, you didn't, I agreed. You saw what you wanted to see. An old woman who didn't understand the modern world. Someone to pity. Someone to feel superior to. My youngest son's voice was barely a whisper. How do we fix this? I stood up from the table, smoothed my simple dress. the same kind of dress they'd mocked earlier in the evening. You can't fix it tonight. This isn't something that gets resolved with an apology over Christmas dinner. You need to understand something. I don't need your money. I don't need your help. I don't need your pity. What I needed was your respect, and I didn't have it. What I needed was for you to see me as a whole person, not just as mom, the woman who took care of you. And you couldn't do that. I picked up my purse and headed toward the door. Behind me, I heard chairs scraping, voices calling my name, but I kept walking. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to be away from the people who'd spent months making me feel small. Outside, the cold December air hit my face. I stood there for a moment, looking up at the stars, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger, not sadness, something closer to relief. The truth was finally out there. The performance was over. My daughter caught up to me first. She was still crying, mascara running down her face. "Mom, please don't leave like this. Please." I turned to face her. "Sweetheart, I love you. I love all of you. But tonight hurt. It hurt because it wasn't new. It was just the culmination of months, years even, of being treated like I was less than. Like I didn't matter. Like my life was small and meaningless." "It's not," she said desperately. "Your life isn't small. We were blind. We were stupid and blind and so wrong about everything." "You were," I agreed. "And now you know better. But knowing better doesn't erase what was said, what was felt. I need time to process this. We all do." My sons came out onto the porch. My oldest son looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last hour. "Mom, please, let us make this right." "You can't make it right tonight," I repeated. "But maybe over time we can rebuild what was broken. Maybe you can learn to see me differently. Not as someone who needs saving, not as someone who failed at life, but as someone who built something remarkable while choosing to live humbly." My youngest son's voice shook. "Were you ever going to tell us? About the money, the properties, everything?" I smiled sadly. "Eventually. When the time was right, when I felt like you could handle it with maturity and respect. But after tonight, I realized the time was now. Because if I'd let this go on any longer, the resentment would have destroyed me. I couldn't keep pretending your words didn't hurt. I couldn't keep smiling through the condescension." "We're ashamed," my oldest son said. "Deeply, truly ashamed." "Good," I replied. "Shame means you're capable of growth. It means you recognize what you did wrong. But shame alone isn't enough. You need to examine why you treated me that way in the first place. Why you assumed wealth had to look a certain way. Why you equated simplicity with failure. Why you stopped being curious about who I really was beyond the role I played in your lives." The night air was getting colder. Behind us, through the windows, I could see my grandchildren still sitting at the table, confused and worried. My heart ached for them. They didn't deserve to witness this. But maybe, in some way, they needed to see it. Needed to understand that treating people based on appearances, on assumptions, on superficial judgments, leads to moments like this. "I'm going home now," I said. "We'll talk after the holidays. After everyone has had time to think. Really think. About what happened here tonight." My daughter grabbed my hand. "Do you forgive us?" I squeezed her fingers gently. "I will. But not tonight. Tonight I'm just tired. Tired of being underestimated. Tired of being dismissed. I need to go home and remember who I am outside of being your mother. I need to reconnect with the woman who built all of that wealth you saw on that phone. The woman who took risks and made smart decisions and created security for herself. That woman got lost somewhere in all of this. And I need to find her again." I drove home that night with tears streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness exactly. Something more complex. Relief mixed with grief. Victory mixed with loss. I'd finally stood up for myself, finally showed them the truth, but in doing so, I'd also exposed just how broken our relationship had become, how long I'd been suffering in silence, how deep the wounds really went. When I walked into my house, the same house they'd pitied me for living in, I looked around with new eyes. This wasn't a symbol of failure. This was a choice. A deliberate decision to live below my means, to prioritize financial security over appearances, to build wealth quietly rather than display it loudly. Every piece of furniture, every simple decoration, every old familiar corner represented wisdom they'd mistaken for ignorance. I made myself tea and sat in my favorite chair by the window. The same chair I'd sat in 30 years ago when I made my first real estate investment. The same chair where I'd reviewed countless financial statements, calculated risks, planned strategies. My children had no idea how many nights I'd spent in this chair, building the empire they'd just discovered existed. The phone started ringing. Text messages flooded in. My daughter apologizing repeatedly. My sons asking if we could talk. My daughter-in-law saying she felt horrible. But I turned the phone off. I needed silence. I needed to be alone with my thoughts and my feelings and the weight of everything that had happened. The days after Christmas were strange. Word spread through the extended family. Apparently, my oldest son had told his wife's sister, who told her mother, who told everyone else. Suddenly, I was getting calls from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Some were genuinely shocked and impressed. Others seemed almost offended, as if I'd been keeping secrets that I had some obligation to share, as if my financial life was somehow community property. My sister called. She was the only one who'd known the full extent of my wealth, the only one I'd trusted with that information over the years. "I heard what happened at Christmas," she said. "How are you holding up?" "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me feels vindicated. Part of me feels heartbroken. I proved my point, but I lost something in the process. "You didn't lose anything," she said firmly. "You revealed what was already true. They were already treating you terribly. They already had no respect for you. You just stopped pretending not to notice." She was right, of course. But that didn't make it hurt less. "Do you regret showing them?" she asked. I thought about it for a long moment. No, I regret that it had to come to that. I regret that they pushed me to a point where I felt like I had no choice but to defend myself so dramatically. But I don't regret them knowing the truth. I'm tired of being invisible. Tired of being dismissed. "Good," she said. "You built something incredible. You should be proud of it. And they should have been curious enough to discover it on their own instead of making assumptions." After we hung up, I sat with that thought. They should have been curious. That was really the core of it. They'd spent years around me and never once asked the deeper questions. Never wondered what I did with my time. Never inquired about my finances except to assume they were inadequate. Never looked past the surface to see who I really was. That's what hurt most. Not the comments about my clothes or my car, but the complete lack of curiosity about my inner life, about my dreams, my accomplishments, my secret victories. I'd become a cardboard cutout to them. A one-dimensional character whose only purpose was to play the role of mom. 2 weeks after Christmas, my daughter showed up at my door. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't been sleeping well. "Mom, please, can we talk?" I let her in. Made coffee. We sat across from each other at my kitchen table. The same table where she'd done her homework as a child, where we'd had countless conversations over the years, where I'd listened to her problems and celebrated her successes and been present for every moment she needed me. "I've been thinking about everything," she started. "Constantly. I can't sleep. I can't focus at work. I keep replaying every conversation we've had over the past few years, and I'm horrified by what I see, by who I became, by how I treated you." I stayed quiet. Let her continue. "I got so caught up in my own success that I stopped seeing you as a real person. You became this thing in my mind, this symbol of a simpler generation, someone who represented the old way of doing things. And I looked down on that. I looked down on you, and I'm so ashamed." Her voice broke. "You raised me better than that. You taught me to be kind and respectful, and to never judge people based on appearances. And I did exactly what you taught me not to do. I judged you. I dismissed you. I treated you like you were less than me because I couldn't see past the surface." "Why do you think you did that?" I asked gently. She wiped her eyes. "Honestly, I think I needed to feel superior. My life looked successful on the outside, but inside I was struggling. The pressure at work, the stress of trying to be perfect, the constant comparison with everyone around me. And when I looked at you, living simply, seemingly content with less, part of me was jealous. Jealous of your peace, your lack of stress, but I couldn't admit that jealousy, so I turned it into pity instead. I convinced myself you were struggling so I could feel better about my own struggles. That was probably the most honest thing anyone had said to me in years. Thank you for telling me that. I don't deserve your forgiveness, she said, but I'm asking for it anyway. Not today. Not right now. But eventually. I want to rebuild our relationship. I want to know you. Really know you. Not the version of you I created in my head, but the real you. The woman who built an empire while we were too blind to notice. I'd like that, I said softly. But it's going to take time. And it's going to require real change. Not just apologies, but different behavior. Different attitudes. Different questions. I know. She nodded. I'm ready to do that work. We all are. The boys and I have been talking. We want to understand how you did it. Not just how you made the money, but how you stayed so grounded. How you managed to build all of that without letting it change who you are. Without needing to show off or prove yourself. That's real strength, Mom. And we were too stupid to see it. Over the next few weeks, they came one by one. Each of my children. Having similar conversations, expressing similar regrets, asking similar questions. And slowly, carefully, we started rebuilding what had been broken. My oldest son wanted to know about my investment strategy, how I'd chosen properties, how I'd managed risk, how I'd built passive income streams. We spent an afternoon going through my portfolio, and I watched his respect for me grow with every document we reviewed. "This is sophisticated stuff, Mom," he kept saying. "This is really sophisticated." "I know," I replied simply. My youngest son asked about the emotional side, how I'd managed to keep quiet all those years, how I'd handled being underestimated, how I'd found the strength not to prove myself sooner. "I don't think I could have done it," he admitted. "I would have wanted everyone to know immediately." "That's because you're young," I told him. "When you're young, you need external validation. You need people to know you're successful because that's how you measure your own worth. But as you get older, if you're lucky, you realize that your worth doesn't depend on anyone else's perception. It just is. And once you understand that, you become free." He sat with that for a while. Then he asked, "Do you think we can really fix this? Really get past what happened?" "I think we can build something new," I said. "We can't go back and undo the past. But we can create a different future. One where you see me fully. Where you're curious about who I am beyond being your mother. Where respect isn't conditional on bank accounts or appearances." "I want that," he said quietly. "I really want that." The truth is, I wanted it too. Despite everything, despite the pain and the humiliation and the months of being dismissed, I wanted my relationship with my children to heal. Because underneath all the hurt, there was still love. There had always been love. It had just gotten buried under assumptions and arrogance and the dangerous habit of taking people for granted. But I also knew something else. I knew that this experience had changed me. I'd spent so long being quiet, being humble, being willing to let people underestimate me because I didn't need their approval. But there's a difference between not needing approval and accepting disrespect. And I'd finally learned to draw that line. I want you to understand something important about wealth and how we perceive it. We live in a world that's obsessed with showing off. Social media has made it worse. Everyone's posting their luxury cars, their designer bags, their expensive vacations. We've created this culture where success has to be visible, has to be loud, has to be constantly validated by strangers on the internet. But real wealth, the kind that lasts, the kind that provides genuine security and freedom, that's usually quiet. The truly wealthy people I've met in my life, the ones with generational wealth, the ones who've built empires that will outlast them, they're not the ones posting about it. They're not the ones who need you to know. They're the ones driving modest cars and wearing simple clothes and living in homes that don't scream for attention. Because they understand something fundamental. They understand that wealth is a tool, not an identity. It's a resource that provides options and security, not something that defines your worth as a human being. And they certainly don't need to prove anything to anyone because their bank accounts speak for themselves, even if nobody else ever sees them. That's what I tried to teach my children by example. That's what I was modeling all those years. Living simply while building substantial wealth. Showing them that you don't need to perform success. You just need to be successful. But they missed the lesson entirely. They were too busy buying into the culture of performance to recognize the quiet power of what I was actually doing. And maybe that's partly my fault. Maybe I was too quiet. Maybe I should have been more explicit about the values I was trying to demonstrate. But I also think there's something to be said for letting people draw their own conclusions. For trusting that the people who love you will eventually see past the surface to understand who you really are. I just didn't expect it would take a crisis for that to happen. 3 months after Christmas, things had settled into a new normal. My children were different now. More respectful. More curious. More present. They asked questions they'd never asked before. About my past. About how I'd learned to invest. About the mentors I'd had. The books I'd read. The risks I'd taken. My daughter wanted to know about the first property I'd ever bought. So I told her. It was a small duplex in a neighborhood everyone said was too risky. I'd saved for years to afford the down payment. I'd done all the research myself, studied market trends, analyzed rental rates, calculated every possible expense. And I'd been terrified. Absolutely terrified. But I did it anyway. "What made you take that risk?" she asked. "Your father had just left," I said quietly. It was the first time I'd mentioned him in years. My children never asked about him. The divorce had happened when they were young, and we'd all moved on. Or so I thought. I was alone with 3 kids and no real financial safety net. I could have played it safe, kept my money in a savings account, stayed scared, or I could bet on myself. Bet that I was smart enough, capable enough, disciplined enough to build something real. "And you did," she whispered. "I did. That duplex became 2 duplexes, then a small apartment building, then commercial properties. Each success gave me the confidence to take the next step, but it all started with being terrified and doing it anyway. My oldest son asked about the failures, because surely, he reasoned, I must have had some. And he was right. I'd made mistakes, bad investments, poor timing, tenants who destroyed properties, partners who tried to cheat me. The road to wealth is never smooth, never simple, never without its share of pain and loss. "How did you handle the failures?" he asked. "By not letting them define me," I said. "By understanding that failure is just information. It tells you what doesn't work so you can adjust your strategy. The only real failure is giving up entirely. Everything else is just learning." He nodded slowly. "I think I've been so afraid of failing that I've played everything too safe. I have my job, my salary, my 401k, and I thought that was enough. But watching you, understanding what you built, I realize I've been thinking too small." "There's nothing wrong with safety," I told him. "But there's a difference between being cautious and being paralyzed by fear. You have to find your own balance, your own tolerance for risk. What worked for me might not work for you. But the principle remains the same. You have to believe you're capable of more than you currently have. And then you have to take action on that belief." These conversations were healing something in me I didn't even realize was broken. For so long, I'd been the silent teacher, demonstrating principles without explaining them, hoping my children would simply absorb wisdom through observation. But maybe what they needed, what we all needed, was dialogue. Real conversation. The kind where I shared not just my successes, but my fears, my doubts, my vulnerable moments. My youngest son brought his wife over one evening. She'd been at that Christmas dinner. She'd been part of the judgment, the condescension, the assumptions. And she was clearly nervous now, sitting in my living room trying to find the words. "I owe you an apology," she finally said. "A real one. Not just sorry you were offended, but sorry for how I treated you. I was cruel. I was dismissive. And there's no excuse for that." I appreciated her honesty. "What changed your perspective?" She thought about it. "Honestly, seeing my husband's relationship with you shift, watching him rediscover respect for you, and realizing that I'd been judging you based on absolutely nothing. I didn't know you. I never tried to know you. I just made assumptions based on surfaces and acted like those assumptions were facts. And that's a terrible way to treat anyone, let alone family." "It is," I agreed. "But you're recognizing it now. That's what matters." "Can I ask you something?" she said hesitantly. "Why do you still live so simply? Now that we know you have the money, why not enjoy it more? Travel more? Buy nicer things?" It was a fair question. One I'd been asked before by the few people who knew about my wealth. Because I am enjoying it. This is what enjoyment looks like for me. I don't need fancy things to feel fulfilled. I don't need expensive experiences to feel alive. What money gives me isn't pleasure. It's peace. Peace of knowing that no matter what happens, I'm secure. That I can handle any emergency, any crisis, any unexpected turn. That freedom, that security, that peace, that's worth more to me than any luxury item could ever be. She nodded slowly, like she was trying to understand a completely foreign concept. And maybe she was. Maybe my generation and hers spoke different languages when it came to money and success and happiness. But that was okay. We didn't have to want the same things. We just had to respect each other's choices. As spring arrived, I started thinking about the future differently. My children knew the truth now. The secret was out. And while our relationships were healing, were growing stronger in many ways, I also felt this shift in how they saw me. I wasn't just mom anymore. I was also this other person. This woman with a complex financial life, with business acumen, with decades of strategic thinking they'd never suspected. And I realized I wanted to share more of that knowledge. Not to prove anything. Not to show off. But because I'd learned so much over the years. And it seemed wasteful to keep all of that wisdom to myself. So I started teaching. Really teaching. My daughter wanted to learn about real estate, so we started looking at properties together. I showed her how to analyze deals, how to spot potential, how to negotiate. My oldest son wanted to diversify his investments, so we reviewed his portfolio and talked about risk management and long-term strategy. My youngest son wanted to understand passive income, so I explained the different streams I'd built and how each one worked. It was satisfying in a way I hadn't expected. For so long, I'd kept my financial life private, almost secretive. But now sharing it, teaching it, passing on what I'd learned, that felt right. That felt like the next chapter of something that had been building for decades. One afternoon, my daughter and I were sitting in a coffee shop reviewing a potential investment property. She was asking smart questions, taking notes, really engaging with the material, and at one point she looked up and said, "I wish I'd learned this from you years ago. I wish I'd been curious enough to ask." "You're asking now," I said. "That's what matters. But think about all the time I wasted, all the years I could have been learning from you. You weren't ready then," I told her gently. "You needed to achieve your own success first, to feel confident in your own abilities. If I'd tried to teach you all of this when you were younger, you might have felt like I was imposing my path on you instead of letting you find your own. Sometimes the timing of lessons matters as much as the lessons themselves." She smiled. "You always know exactly what to say." "Not always," I laughed, "but I've had a lot of years to practice." The truth was, I didn't regret the way things had unfolded. Yes, that Christmas dinner had been painful. Yes, the months leading up to it had hurt. But the breakthrough that came from that pain, the honesty that emerged from that crisis, maybe we needed that. Maybe that was the only way to crack open the assumptions and the complacency and the taking each other for granted that had built up over years. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd revealed everything earlier, if I'd shown them my wealth years ago, before the disrespect had built up, before the assumptions had calcified into something harder to break. Would it have prevented the pain? Or would it have created different problems? Would they have treated me differently for the wrong reasons, respecting my money instead of respecting me as a person? I'll never know. And honestly, I'm at peace with that, because what happened exactly as it needed to. The journey we took, as painful as parts of it were, led us to a place of deeper understanding, a place where our relationships are built on truth instead of assumptions, where respect is earned through genuine connection instead of performance. My grandchildren have noticed the shift too. They're older now, more aware. They've picked up on the change in how their parents talk to me, talk about me. One of my granddaughters asked me recently, "Grandma, why does everyone say you're secretly rich?" I smiled at the word secretly, as if wealth was something scandalous that needed to be hidden. "I'm not secretly anything, sweetheart. I just don't talk about money very much. It's not the most interesting thing about me." "What is the most interesting thing about you?" she asked with genuine curiosity. I thought about it. Probably that I learned to trust myself even when it was scary. That I made decisions that seemed impossible and turned them into reality. That I never let fear stop me from becoming who I wanted to be. She considered this seriously. "I want to be like that." "You can be," I told her. "But you have to start by being yourself first. Not trying to impress anyone, not performing for approval, just being genuinely, authentically you, and then building from that foundation." These are the conversations I wish I'd had with my own children when they were young. But maybe they weren't ready then. Maybe I wasn't ready then. Maybe everything happens in its own time, and our job is simply to stay open to the lessons when they finally arrive. Last month, my children surprised me with something unexpected. They'd pooled their money together and created a scholarship fund in my name, for women over 40 who want to start their own businesses or learn about real estate investing. Women who've been told they're too old, too late, too inexperienced. Women who need someone to believe in them the way I believed in myself all those years ago. When they told me about it, I cried. Real tears. Not of sadness, but of pride. Pride that they'd taken the lessons from our painful year and turned them into something meaningful. Something that would help other women avoid being underestimated, overlooked, dismissed. "We wanted to honor what you built," my daughter explained. "Not just the money, but the courage it took, the vision, the persistence. We want other women to know that it's never too late, that being underestimated can actually be an advantage if you use it right." My oldest son added, "We also wanted to apologize in a way that mattered, not just with words but with action. This scholarship is our way of saying we finally understand what you were trying to teach us all along." I was overwhelmed. This was more than I'd ever expected, more than an apology. It was evidence of real transformation, real growth, real understanding of not just what I'd done, but why it mattered. Looking back now, almost a year after that Christmas dinner that changed everything, I can see the full arc of the story. The years of silent building, the slow accumulation of disrespect, the breaking point, the revelation, the painful honesty, the gradual healing. And now this new chapter where we're not just repairing what was broken, but creating something entirely new. I want you to know something. Whoever you are, wherever you are, watching this right now. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been dismissed, if you've ever been treated like you're less than you are, you're not alone. It happens to so many of us, especially to women, especially to mothers, especially to those of us who choose to build quietly rather than loudly. But here's what I've learned. Being underestimated is only painful if you need external validation. If you know your worth, if you're secure in your accomplishments, if you've built something real regardless of whether anyone notices, then being underestimated becomes irrelevant. It's their problem, not yours. Their blindness, not your failure. The power isn't in making people see you. The power is in seeing yourself clearly, in knowing your value independent of anyone else's opinion, in building your empire, whatever that looks like for you, with or without an audience. My empire happened to be financial. Yours might be different. It might be creative, intellectual, spiritual, relational. It might be raising children who become good humans. It might be mastering a craft. It might be building a community. It might be healing from trauma and becoming whole again. Whatever it is, if you're building it authentically, if you're doing it for yourself rather than for approval, then you're already successful, already powerful, already enough. Don't wait for permission to value yourself. Don't wait for recognition to feel proud. Don't wait for others to see your worth before you claim it yourself. I spent decades building wealth in silence, and yes, there was pain in being invisible. But there was also freedom. Freedom from the pressure to perform. Freedom from the need to constantly prove myself. Freedom to make mistakes without an audience. Freedom to learn and grow and evolve without commentary. And when the truth finally came out, when my children finally saw what I'd built, the satisfaction wasn't in their shock or their apologies. It was in knowing that I'd stayed true to myself the entire time, that I hadn't compromised my values for their approval, that I'd built something real on my own terms. That's the lesson I want to leave you with. Build on your own terms. Live according to your own values. Let people underestimate you if they want to. Their assumptions say more about them than they ever could about you. And to all the mothers out there, all the women who've been dismissed by their own children, who've felt invisible in their own families, who've wondered if their sacrifices mattered at all, I see you. Your sacrifices did matter. Your strength does count. Your quiet power is real, even if nobody acknowledges it. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. But if the day comes when you decide to reveal your truth, when you decide you're done being underestimated, when you choose to show the world who you really are, do it on your terms. Do it when you're ready. Do it because you deserve to be seen, not because you need validation. My relationship with my children will never be what it was before that Christmas. But that's okay. It's better now. More honest, more real, built on mutual respect instead of assumptions. And while I wish we could have gotten here without the pain, I also understand that sometimes pain is the only thing that breaks through years of accumulated blindness. They see me now. Really see me. Not as a symbol or a role or a simple old woman who never accomplished anything. They see me as a full person, complex, capable, powerful in quiet ways they'd never imagined. And I see them differently too. I see their capacity for growth, their willingness to admit when they're wrong, their desire to be better than they were. That's all any of us can ask for. Not perfection, but evolution. Not flawlessness, but the courage to face our mistakes and learn from them. So here we are, a year later, different, changed, hopefully wiser. My empire is no longer secret. My children know the truth. The dynamic has shifted. And while part of me misses the simplicity of being underestimated, of flying under the radar, of building without scrutiny, I also appreciate this new phase. This phase where I can teach openly, where I can share what I've learned, where my grandchildren can grow up knowing that their grandmother isn't just someone who bakes cookies and gives hugs, but someone who took risks and built wealth and trusted herself even when it was terrifying. If my story resonates with you, I want to hear yours. Comment below and tell me about a time you were underestimated. Tell me about what you've built in silence. Tell me about your quiet power that the world doesn't see. Because your story matters. Your strength matters. Your journey matters. And if you're still in the phase of being overlooked, of being dismissed, of being treated like you're less than you are, hold on. Stay true to yourself. Keep building. Keep growing. Keep trusting your vision even when nobody else sees it. Your day will come, the moment when the truth reveals itself. And when it does, you'll be glad you stayed authentic through it all. Subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more stories like mine. Stories of women who refused to be defined by other people's limitations. Women who built empires in silence. Women who understood that real power doesn't need to announce itself. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's been underestimated. Someone who's building something real while everyone around them assumes they're doing nothing. Someone who needs to be reminded that their worth isn't determined by anyone else's perception. And most importantly, remember this. You are not what they think you are. You are what you know yourself to be. And if you're building something meaningful, something authentic, something true to who you are, then you're already successful, already powerful, already exactly where you need to be. The empire you're building might not look like mine. It might not be measured in dollars or properties or investment portfolios, but if it's real to you, if it's meaningful to you, if it's changing you into someone stronger and wiser and more complete, then it's worth more than all the wealth in the world. Stay strong, stay authentic, stay true to yourself, and never ever let anyone convince you that you're less than the incredible person you know yourself to be. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. Thank you for seeing me, even if only through a screen, in a way my own children couldn't for so long. You matter. Your story matters. Your quiet power matters. Never forget that.